Welcome back to Spiritwind. We're so glad that you have decided to join us again. And if you don't know, Spiritwind is a study group for spiritual adventurers. We get together every week and discuss different topics. And you know, they may not sound like they are spiritual topics, so to speak, but they all kind of tie back into some sort of spiritual quest or just how people are thinking. And so we invite you to come and join us. We meet every week, and we have changed our location. We used to be on High Street. Now we are at 1338 Lincoln Way. It is the Pioneer Methodist Church, and we meet right in the sanctuary. So it's very easy to find us at 5:30 every Wednesday. So we invite you to come and help us discuss these things. Now, we have with us Rick Reich, our guru, minister, teacher, and he will be leading us in our discussions. And first of all, Rick, I'd like to ask you, what did we talk about last month in June?
Well, for the month of June, we looked at a topic which I simply called sacred lists of things. And it's an interesting, a different kind of way of looking at different religions and philosophies just by numbers. And so we're going to look at some of those.
Okay, so what do you mean? Like numerology and things like that?
Well, let's just go 1 through 10, and I'll show you examples of that. So, with 1, we look at the idea of, it's a philosophical idea called monism. And monism is the idea that there is only one substance, and that everything that we see in reality, though they seem like they're separate things, are actually only one thing. And so there's a difference between how things appear and what their actual reality is. Now, the number 2 has the idea of dualism, and dualism is the idea that two things, monism from mono, meaning one, and dualism from dual, meaning two. And with duality, we, instead of seeing that the world is all one, we see a bunch of opposites, up and down, inside out, male, female, God, the world, heaven and earth, mind, body, mind, brain, all of these things. And so at some level, both are actually true. In our world, the world we experience daily, we experience duality. We see ourselves with other things, but probably at the most basic level, at the subatomic level and below, everything is one because everything is ultimately just energy. Go ahead.
Well, that's very basic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Getting down to everything is energy and understanding, yeah. Okay, number 3.
Number 3, just a couple things, and I'll just say here, we went through a lot more of things that were of these numbers than just the ones I'm sharing. You would have had to been to the whole class. But for instance, besides the Christian Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, in Egypt, they had a Trinity too, which was the god Osiris, the goddess Isis, and their child Horus. And then within Hinduism, they also have a trinity of sorts. It's Brahma the creator, Vishnu the sustainer, and Shiva the destroyer. And in Hinduism, they see that time moves cyclically in a cycle, and so Brahma creates, Vishnu then sustains what has been created, and then finally Shiva comes in and destroys the order, which makes it start all over again with Brahma creating once again, and the cycle begins again. With the number 4, there's many traditions that recognize the 4 directions of east, south, west, and north and combine them with the 4 elements of air, fire, water, and earth. And then in Buddhism, there are what are called the Four Noble Truths. Number one being the universality of suffering, the idea that nobody gets out of this world without suffering. And two, that the idea that suffering comes as a result of desire or ignorant craving, that we never are satisfied, we never feel like we've got enough, and so we're constantly craving. And the third is that the end of suffering comes through a total abandonment of ignorant craving. And four, the way to accomplish that is only through what is known as the Eightfold Path. Now we move on to 5. In 5, the fives we have, 2 different religions. We have the religion of Islam. They have what they are called the 5 pillars of Islam. They're the main teachings of Islam. And the first is what's called the Shahada. And it's simply the statement, there is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his prophet. The next is prayer 5 times a day. As you've probably seen on television or somewhere, that they stop what they're doing 5 times a day and pray. The next is giving of alms, which is kind of like our giving out tithes and offerings to the church, but their giving of alms is something like 2.5%, and it is given to the poor. Then they fast in the month of Ramadan, which is the month in which the Quran was revealed. And then finally all Muslims that are able-bodied are to make a pilgrimage at least once in their life to Mecca. Then in the religion of Sikhism, the Sikhs, they have what they call the 5 Ks. And I'll tell you what they are. The first is Kes, and Kes means the uncut hair. You'll notice often that Sikhs wear turbans, and that's because they don't cut their hair, and their hair is kind of rolled up on top of their head with the turban covering their hair. And then they have a kanga, which is a ceremonial comb, kachera, which are warriors' underwear. They seem to be like the special underwear that are worn by Mormons. I mean, along the same ideas. They wear a kara, which is a steel bracelet that they wear. And then they have the 5th K is the kirpan, which is a ceremonial dagger that they always have. Well, when we come to 6, we've got the 6 actual days of creation, and in the book of Revelation we have the number 666, and in 7 we have the 7 colors of the rainbow and the 7 chakras, which are the energy points in the 7 areas of the body, and each of those chakras follows one of the colors of the rainbow as well. And then there's the 7 deadly sins, which are pride, covetousness, lust, envy, gluttony, anger, and sloth. Then for the numbers 8, we have the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, which are a bunch of rights. Right understanding, right thought, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right meditation. And 9, there's 9 months of pregnancy, and we talk of it in a metaphorical way, as if being pregnant with thoughts or with ideas and so forth. And then 9 is the number of the Holy Spirit. In Corinthians 12, it tells of the 9 the gifts of the Spirit. In Galatians, it tells us of the 9 fruits of the Spirit. So we got the 9 gifts of the Spirit, the 9 fruits of the Spirit, and then also in Corinthians, the 9 appointments of the Spirit, meaning pastor, teacher, and all the administrative type things. And then finally in 10, we have the 10 commandments, and we have the 10 spheres that are on the tree of life in Jewish Kabbalah. And so if you don't know about the Jewish Kabbalah, you could read my first Spiritwind book, which is advertised at the beginning of the program. So anyway.
Wow. So we covered 1 through 10 on the numbers, and there are quite a few different things that we can associate with those. So let's go on and talk what we'll be discussing in July.
In July, we're going to talk about a philosophical school, so to speak, that's called Existentialism. And Existentialism is kind of interesting. I can definitely remember the first time I heard the word existentialism, and I believe I was in either the 10th or the 11th grade in high school, and a girl that was younger than me was telling me that she was an existentialist, and I had not even heard of that word before. But she made it sound very intriguing, but I never really followed it through until I got to studying philosophy in college and so forth. Existentialism, there's no formal school of philosophy that's called existentialism, but it's grouped and categorized that way as a group because there are certain philosophers that have staunch individualism. They're noted rooted in the meaning of existence rather in traditional philosophy which is academic and remote from life. As Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, to live as an existentialist means to be ready to pay for this view and not merely to lay it down in books. Another feature of existentialism that has caught popular ideas, and that's the idea of angst, from which we get the word anxiety. And this kind of comes from the father of existentialism. He was a Danish philosopher by the name of Søren Kierkegaard, and you can tell the angst is there by some of the titles of his books, like Fear and Trembling, The Concept of Dread, The Sickness Unto Death. You know, they're dealing with that. And so what we're going to do this month is we're going to look at 4 of these thinkers. Now, actually in the class, we're going to think about a lot more than just 4, but at least for this introduction, we're just going to look at 4. 2 women and 2 men. And so we'll see what they have to say. As I said, Søren Kierkegaard was the father of existentialism. He lived from 1813 to 1855. He was the youngest child of a large family. His father, Pedersen Michael Kierkegaard, was a prosperous merchant. But he cursed God one time, and when he cursed God in his wrath, he felt that he could never forgive himself and that he was condemned. So he felt that he was condemned for blasphemy, and he died at 82. Well, because of the way his father was, Søren wrote this later in one of his diary entries. It says, "I have been from childhood on in the grip of an overpowering melancholy." Now, they didn't talk about depression in those days. They talked about melancholy. And of course, maybe if they had some antidepressants in those days, he wouldn't have been the way he was. And we would have been left without his writings.
Right. It stimulated his thought process, I
Right.
guess. Yeah.
Now, this gets a little iffy here with his with Soren. See, I told you he was the youngest from the large family, but the difference was Soren's mother had been his father's servant before she became his second wife. So, I mean, he got his servant pregnant before they were even married with Soren, and then he married her. So he felt, in fact, he wrote, "After my death, no one will find in my papers a single explanation as to what it was that really filled my life." But we got his writings, so we found out.
Oh.
Yeah, we have his journals and everything, so we know. He was first a university student that devoted himself to theology, but he switched to philosophy and literature. And when he wrote his books, he had this habit of using pseudonyms, and not like one. It's oftentimes people will use one pseudonym as their pen name, but he used almost different ones for every book.
Oh.
At least his philosophical books. And what he taught was that life presents us with a series of choices that we alone have to resolve. And the example of his life was that he had a 3-year courtship with a woman named Regina Olsen, who they were both madly in love. And then he proposed to her after 3 years in 1841, but then he broke off the engagement because he felt his melancholy made him unsuitable for marriage. He thought he would bring her down, but what he actually did was kind of disgrace the whole family for backing out of the marriage. He said that truth is subjectivity versus objectivity. And he said the crucial thing is to find out a truth which is truth for me, to find the idea for which I am willing to live and die. And he felt that there was always uncertainty with human life, and therefore our only position in life was to have faith, because the uncertainty doesn't give all the answers. And he was famous for making that statement, a leap of faith. Yeah. Now the other man I was going to talk about is Jean-Paul Sartre. He lived from 1905 to 1980. He was a French existentialist, philosopher, novelist, all kinds of things. Sartre was born, and his father was an officer in the French Navy, and his mother, Anne Marie Schweitzer, was the first cousin of Albert Schweitzer. As a teenager, he became interested in philosophy and started studying. He got a degree in philosophy in Paris, and in 1929 he met Simone de Beauvoir, who one day would write The Second Sex. It's very interesting. She went to the Sorbonne, which was kind of the Harvard of France, and became a noted philosopher, but she refused marriage, and they were not monogamous, yet they were lifelong companions, and even were buried together.
Oh.
So they basically had what we would call today an open marriage, but were still deeply committed to each other. Sartre's primary idea is that we're condemned to be free. There is no creator, thus we are alone without excuse. And Sartre and all the existentialists emphasized the importance of choice. And in 1938 he wrote a novel called Nausea, which is a very short novel, but it's fascinating. It's not like anything you've ever read before. And then his major philosophical work was Being and Nothingness, which he wrote in 1943. Now the two women. Simone de Beauvoir, as I said, was a life partner of Jean-Paul Sartre. She wrote The Second Sex, and it was a foundational track in the feminist movement of that time. She got a postgraduate exam in philosophy, and Sartre won first place, and she came in second in the grades. And then she took philosophy, as I said, at the Sorbonne, and wrote her dissertation on the concept of Leibniz, who was a 17th century German philosopher. In Second Sense, she says that she felt like the role of a woman was the existentialist problem par excellence, because women were not allowed to live authentic lives in her time, and until they could, it wouldn't. Now, the final person we're looking at is Simone Weil, and she's a real paradox. She lived from 1909 to 1943. Weil was an anarchist and a conservative, a French patriot and a critic of France, a pacifist who fought in the war against Franco with George Orwell, a Jew who was buried in a Catholic section of an English cemetery. And she fought on the front lines with George Orwell in the war against Franco, and the only reason she ended up having to leave the front was the person was cooking for the soldiers, put a pot of boiling oil on the ground that he was using to cook with, and she stepped in it. Ooh. And so she had to leave it. Anyway, for a while, philosophy was not just an academic discipline. It was a way in which we live our life. After graduating, which she took the first place certificate in general philosophy and logic, Simone de Beauvoir took second place. But she's more of a social philosopher than a regular philosopher, because when she finished all of her schooling, she went and taught. This is amazing, I think. She taught in 3 towns with an evening class in literature for factory workers. Oh. She believed that this class would help them in their verbal skills, enrich and empower their lives, and so she tried to organize them for a strike, but without success.
Oh.
She said, the force of affliction, the suffering produced by factory work, which brought with it an overwhelming sense of degradation and meaningless, could only change if they did 2 things. One, start paying attention in order to see what's going on, know what's going on, and to self-educate. Not stay where they are, but try to educate themselves. And finally, to not fall into inertia, but rather, if it even needs be, to have civil disobedience, which would be protests and so forth. And of all things, Simone Weil actually died in a hunger strike in 1943.
Oh my goodness. Well, you know what? I was thinking that existentialism seems to connect with the Four Noble Truths.
It does.
In a way.
It does.
Because it seems like suffering is the basis
a part of it, yeah,
of this, and that everyone is going to go through suffering, which is what the Four Noble Truths are saying.
Right.
And that you just have to work your way out of it.
Right. And they say it's by the choices that we make. that we worked our way out of it, depending on the choices we make.
So, do you think these existentialists had any connection with the Buddhists at that time? Is there any way that you've seen any connection with that?
Well, they would have known of it. It would be when we do the whole class, we'll see, like, for instance, another existentialist, or at least he's classed with that next existentialist, is Friedrich Nietzsche.
Uh-huh.
He was very influenced by Arthur Schopenhauer, and Arthur Schopenhauer is one of the first philosophers that started working with Buddhism. And Nietzsche talks about Buddhism as well because of that. So.
Well, I think this is a good way for us to see that all these subject matters kind of tie in together, don't they?
They do.
Yeah, and I guess we don't have any contemporary existentialist authors, do we, that you know of?
Well, there's a lot of people that write about existentialism. I don't have any of those right off the top of my head, but I've read plenty of books by students of existentialism that write books, usually about these people. They're usually talking about these people because these were the ones that it really started with. Yeah.
So once the existentialism was defined by these people, then everything else is just iterations of that.
Yeah, in fact, what I was going to say, let's see, I find the year Sartre was lived real quick. Yeah, Sartre lived till 1980.
Oh, right.
Jean-Paul Sartre, he lived from 1905 to 1980. And so he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1964, but he refused it.
He didn't think he was worth it, or?
No, he said that he felt that when they do that, they're trying to make a commodity out of a person.
Oh.
And he wasn't going to allow himself to be made a commodity, is what he said. But there's another, even more contemporary than him. There was another one, my mind went blank. Albert Camus, and he was another one, and I really liked him. He would say that he's not an existentialist, but everyone still puts him in the pile with the existentialists. He called himself an absurdist.
An absurdist.
Yeah, because he thinks that you can't prove anything, it's all absurd.
Oh. Well, it's probably pretty true that you can't prove any of these things.
But
think about them.
Yeah, but he ended up being killed in a car wreck with his publisher.
Oh.
Yeah, the publisher had a kind of a racy car and wanted to take him for a ride.
Oh, and didn't end up well.
Didn't end up well, no.
That's too bad. Okay, well, again, these are the type of things that we'd like to discuss when we're having our Spiritwind meetings, which again are every Wednesday night at 5:30 at our new location at the Pioneer Methodist Church, 1338 Lincoln Way in Auburn. And everyone is welcome. There's no charge for this. Rick leads the discussion. Everyone is welcome to comment and bring your thoughts about these type of things. Existentialism seems like kind of a hard thing to discuss, but I'm sure we'll get into it a little bit more during our class. So again, I invite everyone to join us, and I want to thank you again, Rick, for this very interesting topic. See you there.